I mean, I want you to imagine something for just a second. Think about being so utterly desperate for, like, a second chance at life that you would take literally any job.
Right, like it doesn't matter how grueling the physical labor is.
Exactly, or how incredibly toxic or, nasty the work environment might be. You just sign on the dotted line because you have zero other options.
You just need a paycheck to stay afloat.
Yeah, but then, on your very first day, you discover that this job comes with a set of hazards that are decidedly not in any employee handbook.
Oh, for sure. We're talking about occupational hazards that go far beyond, like a micromanager or throwing out your back from heavy lifting.
Oh yeah, totally different lead.
It's the kind of work environment where the actual threat to your life is something completely unexplainable.
And that is the exact territory we are exploring in today's deep dive. We're looking at this fictional narrative from the YouTube channel Jordan Grupe Horror.
Yeah, the story is called, I Work for a Junk Removal Company, I'll Never Go Back.
Right. Written by Chris West, an author who also goes by his Reddit handle, Sunhead Prime. And our mission today is to figure out how this specific story brilliantly fuses the very real, gritty anxieties of blue-collar survival with, like, escalating off-the-rails supernatural terror.
It really is a prime example of a fascinating subgenre known as occupational horror.
Which is such a cool concept.
It is, because the beauty of occupational horror is how it takes that universal dread of the 9-to-5 grind and literalizes it into a physical monster.
Like the Sunday scaries. Right.
Exactly. Most of us have experienced the Sunday scaries, that dread before a tough work week. This genre takes that psychological pressure and literally gives it fangs.
But to understand how this particular story pulls that off so effectively, we really need to look at how it grounds itself in a very bleak, recognizable reality first.
Yeah, because it doesn't open with a haunted house.
No, not at all. There's no jump scare. It actually begins with the crushing weight of the criminal justice system.
Right, it starts in a prison cell.
Yeah, the narrator gives us this incredibly raw, unflinching backstory. He describes how, for the vast majority of his life, he was basically dragged around by what he poetically calls the twin steeds of addiction and crime.
Just surviving from one fix to the next.
Entirely consumed by the lifestyle right up until he gets arrested. And the author provides this visceral, stomach-turning detail where the narrator talks about hitting absolute rock bottom. He's physically vomiting into a stainless steel prison toilet.
Oh, man. Which is just brutal.
But in that lowest possible moment of withdrawal and confinement, he actually finds the motivation he thought he'd lost forever.
Yeah, that forced sobriety, combined with the harsh reality of incarceration, it acts as a brutal wake-up call for him.
It really does.
He puts in the hard work while inside. He detoxes, gets his head straight, and emerges from his stint healthier and entirely reformed. I mean, he's genuinely ready to participate in society again.
He really wants to do things the right way, but the tragedy is that society is absolutely not ready to let him back in.
Yeah, that door is shut.
The text makes it explicitly clear that, nobody wants to hire someone who colored outside of life's lines. He just faces constant rejection.
Thankfully, though, his parole officer finally cuts him a break.
Right, connects him with a guy named Pete, who owns a business called Moving Buddies.
Which, despite that friendly name, is definitely not a moving company.
No, they are not packing up fine china for a nice family relocating to the suburbs.
Oh, not at all.
Moving Buddies is a specialized junk removal service. They tackle the absolute worst-case scenarios, like sudden evictions and extreme hoarder homes.
And this specific line of work is so crucial to the themes of the story. Society generates massive amounts of waste and broken lives, and it relies on this completely invisible workforce to sweep all of that under the rug.
Yeah, well said. And the narrator is partnered with a guy named Devin, who just goes by D.
D's a driver, right?
Yeah, driver and also an ex-con. He actually did time for armed robbery. And these two guys instantly bond over their shared desperation and their mutual understanding of how the world views them now.
D has this sharp, cynical line where he tells the narrator to wait until he tries the dating apps.
Oh yeah, pointing out that society fundamentally hates ex-cons.
Exactly. But D is incredibly pragmatic about it. He acknowledges the job is terrible, but notes it is 1,000 times better than going back to jail.
He also gives us a read on their boss, Pete. He describes Pete as being, quote, tight as a dolphin's asshole with money.
Which is quite the visual.
But he admits that Pete understands their struggle and, will cut them some slack when absolutely no one else will.
What's fascinating here is how the author uses this socioeconomic reality to build a psychological trap for the characters,
What?
long before any physical trap springs.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Right. Think about the biggest cliche in horror media. You, as the audience, are usually sitting on your couch yelling at the screen, asking why the characters don't just leave a haunted house.
Or quit the creepy job.
Exactly.
Yeah.
By establishing this incredibly rigid background, the author entirely removes that option.
That brings up a great analogy, actually. When I was going through the source material, it struck me that the parole system operates a lot like someone throwing you into the deep end of a swimming pool. But they tie cinder blocks to your ankles before they push you in and then just yell from the deck for you to swim.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
I initially had to ask myself why a horror author would start a monster story with such a heavy, bleak critique of the post-prison employment trap.
Well, the answer lies in audience immersion. If they quit this junk removal job, they violate the terms of their parole, or they just end up living on the streets.
The stakes are instantly life or death, based purely on economics.
Right. They cannot walk away from danger because their survival depends on that paycheck. The systemic horror binds them in place, ensuring that when the supernatural elements finally arrive, the characters are genuinely cornered by reality.
So feeling completely cornered, they head out to their first job site.
And the environment they pull up to is just overwhelming.
It really is. They arrive at a home inherited by an exhausted-looking son. The son provides a bit of exposition, explaining that his deceased father had suffered a severe mental break in his final years.
Yeah, he descended into wild, paranoid conspiracy theories.
Exactly.
And a mental break of that magnitude often manifests physically in a person's surroundings. The son tries to warn the crew, but I mean, no amount of verbal warning can prepare them for what happens when they actually crack the seal on the front door.
The sensory assault is immediate and violent. The text describes the smell hitting them like the concussive wave of an atomic bomb.
It's just a suffocating, putrid combination of death, rotting food, and vomit.
The house is actually so densely packed with flies that the narrator jokes the entire structure might get yanked from its foundation and carried away into the sky.
Which is darkly hilarious. But to even function in this biohazard, the workers resort to chain-smoking Marlboro Reds.
And blowing massive clouds from Dee's vape.
And they're heavily smearing vapor rub under their noses just to tolerate breathing.
It's so intense. And once they start digging into these towering monuments of trash, they start finding some truly bizarre artifacts.
It basically becomes an archaeological dig through a distorted timeline.
Yeah.
Dee uncovers 2 dead rats buried under this ancient pile of garbage. He jokingly names them Scooby and Shaggy, but he quickly notices something deeply unsettling about the corpses.
They feature massive predatory bite marks across their spines.
Dee remarks that it looks like a lion bite, as if something with razor-sharp teeth just chomped right through the bone.
I mean, adding to the weirdness, the garbage immediately surrounding these mutilated rats is incredibly old. They actually uncover an MCDLT wrapper.
Like the McDonald's thing?
Yeah, which is a promotional item that has not been sold since the 1990s.
Wow.
So the timeline of the trash itself is warped, and then they meet Trashley.
Oh, Trashley?
The narrator is digging through a pile, hears something scurry, and pulls up this beat-up, terrifying porcelain jester doll. Half of its porcelain face is split and missing. One eye just stares unblinkingly, and its limbs feel unusually long and heavy for a child's toy.
And their reaction to finding this nightmare-inducing doll is so crucial to understanding blue-collar work culture.
Yeah.
Instead of tossing it into a contractor bag, the narrator props it up on a garbage throne. He officially names it Trashley, and Dee even wraps a discarded cat collar with a little bell around its neck.
Okay, let's unpack this. I have a really hard time buying this specific scene.
Really? Why?
They are standing inside a house that smells like a rotting corpse. They are finding mutilated animals with impossible predatory bite marks. They find a doll straight out of a horror film, and their reaction is to laugh.
They're just joking around.
Yeah, at one point, Dee gets spooked by a maggot-covered mannequin arm falling out of a closet, and the narrator throws it at him while they both crack up laughing. It feels completely tone-deaf to the danger. Why would anyone act like that?
I get that. It might seem counterintuitive to a reader sitting in a safe, quiet room, but this is actually a deeply authentic portrayal of a blue-collar coping mechanism.
You think so?
Oh, absolutely. You have to recall the context the narrator gives us about hoarding earlier in the story. He notes that these extreme hoarding situations are very rarely just about being messy.
Right.
They are almost always tragic monuments to profound personal loss. The hoarder attempts to save every physical object because they could not save what actually mattered.
Like a job, a spouse, a child.
Exactly.
So they aren't just cleaning up trash. They are literally dismantling someone's untreated trauma.
Exactly that. The workers are surrounded by the physical manifestation of profound grief and severe mental illness. If they do not laugh at the grotesque absurdity of their environment,
If they don't play pranks with the maggoty arm.
right, or name the creepy doll, they would be psychologically crushed by the sheer tragedy of the space. The humor acts as armor. It is a psychological shield they use to maintain their sanity while doing an incredibly degrading job.
Wow, that makes the impending shift in the narrative incredibly jarring then.
Because the author takes that psychological shield and just violently rips it away.
Completely. The eerie ambiance of a weird job site suddenly turns into full-blown mythological terror, and the escalation starts subtly. The little bell attached to Trashley's collar begins jingling, but the sound is coming from rooms they aren't even working in.
And the doll itself seems to relocate whenever they look away.
So creepy. Then the isolation of the house is broken by an external element. A neatly dressed, middle-aged white stranger appears at the open front door, sporting this deeply unnatural, plastered-on smile.
And when the workers try to kick him out due to liability concerns, the stranger just refuses to leave.
He then delivers a highly chilling piece of information. He looks directly at Dee and casually mentions that he knows Dee lives on Baltimore Avenue.
Which is wild. How does this random guy know an ex-con's exact home address?
Seriously. And the stranger claims he has been watching the deceased owner of the house for years. He cryptically states that the old man awakened something he shouldn't have, and that he, the stranger, is simply there to witness the consequences.
What is the consequence?
Yeah, Dee gets furious and goes to pull the curtain back on the back door to see where the guy went, only to find the stranger has completely vanished. He was seemingly swallowed up by waist-high grass in the overgrown backyard.
This stranger basically functions as a herald in the narrative.
Yeah.
His arrival signals the exact moment the mundane rules of physics within the hoarder house completely collapse.
And it is a spectacular collapse. They hear a massive, gut-shaking boom of thunder. But the text explicitly notes the sun is shining brightly outside.
Right, because the thunderclap originates from below the house.
The vibrations literally rattle their teeth. Suddenly, the closet door, the exact same closet where they found the plastic mannequin arm, starts knocking violently.
The structural integrity of the home begins to turn against them. A massive wall of garbage from the back rooms floods into the living room like a tidal wave, physically blocking their main exit.
And the closet door splinters open.
Yeah, the plastic mannequin arm reaches out and grips the door frame. Then a second arm reaches out, but this one is made of gray, ripped, organic flesh, exposing muscle and bone.
And finally, a massive set of bull horns wedges through the narrow doorframe. A gigantic, minotaur-like creature begins breaking its way into the room. Here's where it gets really interesting. Earlier, I made the analogy about the deep end of the pool with the cinder blocks.
Nice.
Well, this house isn't just a tomb of trash. It acts as a literal pressure cooker where the old man's madness has finally taken physical form. But from a storytelling perspective, shifting from suspenseful realism to an action slasher featuring a mythological minotaur is incredibly risky.
Oh, huge risk.
How does the author pull off this sudden genre shift without completely losing the listener's immersion?
The shift works because the supernatural elements are deeply thematic. They are born directly from the environment itself.
Okay, how so?
Well, the Minotaur is not just a random monster. In classical mythology, a Minotaur lives in the center of a labyrinth. A severe hoarder's home is a modern-day labyrinth of garbage.
Oh, wow.
The monster is actually using the discarded mannequin arm as its own appendage, symbolizing how the trash itself has been animated by the owner's paranoia. Our possessions end up possessing us.
That is brilliant.
Even the jester doll, which they jokingly crown the king of the garbage, comes to life on these spindly felt legs. It perfectly reflects the hidden sharp dangers lurking in any hoarder's pile.
Sharp is an understatement, considering the climax in the kitchen turns into an absolute bloodbath.
Complete chaos.
Trashley the doll leaps off the top of the refrigerator, armed with a rusty knife it found somewhere in the mess. It lands squarely on Dee and just starts rapidly slicing his calves open down to the bone.
Dee attempts to grab the doll, and Trashley responds by driving the rusty blade straight through Dee's hands, violently pinning his flesh to the gristle.
The domestic space has been entirely weaponized against them.
Completely.
The narrator manages to drop-kick the doll across the room, but it bounces right back with supernatural agility. It grabs a dirty kitchen fork and sinks the metal tines deep into the back of the narrator's knee.
These grown men are literally fighting for their lives against a raggedy piece of garbage.
Yeah. Then the doll performs a feat of impossible strength. With its stringy felt arms, it lifts a heavy kitchen stove completely off the ground.
Like a baseball pitcher winding up.
Exactly, and hurls it across the room.
The thrown stove shatters the back door, offering them a brief, tantalizing glimpse of daylight. But the appliance lands squarely on Dee's right arm, completely shattering his bones under the immense weight.
Dee is helplessly trapped under the stove. The Minotaur is tearing through the drywall behind them, but the narrator notices a crucial detail. In the empty space where the stove used to be connected, he spots the wavy distortion of the air.
It is a massive gas leak.
Dee looks at him, shattered arm and all, and delivers the ultimate last stand line.
It's so good.
He just tells him to toast those motherfuckers.
Incredible.
The narrator grabs an empty paper towel roll and his cheap Bic lighter. He is still physically wrestling with Trashly, who has now wrapped its felt legs around his neck like a boa constrictor.
But he finally forces the doll off.
Right, throwing it hard against the kitchen wall, which completely shatters its porcelain face.
Revealing what is underneath the porcelain, which is pure nightmare fuel.
It is a red and black, pulsating mass of muscle, bone, and gore. It was never really a doll. It is some kind of organic parasite wearing the doll as a shell.
And then the Minotaur bursts into the kitchen.
The narrator is frantically flicking the spark wheel of his lighter. His thumb is bleeding from the friction. The text includes a fantastic literary nod here, mentioning that he is desperately waiting for the spark to hit exactly 451 degrees.
Love that nod to Bradbury.
Yeah. The paper towel roll finally catches fire. He hurls the flaming cardboard at the pulsating doll right next to the open gas line and dives blindly out the shattered back door.
The resulting explosion levels the entire house. The concussive force throws the narrator 20 feet into the neighbor's yard, instantly knocking him unconscious.
When they finally wake up, they are recovering in the hospital. Dee's going to survive, although he requires extensive surgery.
And the official fire department report conveniently writes the entire incident off as a years-long gas leak that finally ignited.
But the lingering dread remains. Pete, their boss, visits them in the hospital and acts incredibly strange. He asks odd, probing questions and seems genuinely surprised that they survived the ordeal.
Heavily implying he knew exactly what was hiding inside that hoarder house.
That suspicion connects directly back to the middle-aged stranger, who specifically name-dropped Pete's company before the supernatural attack began.
Everything is connected.
The story concludes with a deeply chilling final image. The narrator is lying in his hospital bed. It is 3:00 a.m., and the ward is dead silent. From the dark corridor just outside his room, he hears the faint, unmistakable jingling of a little bell.
A bell.
He looks out into the hallway and sees the shadow of a short, long-limbed figure slowly turning the corner.
The monster survived the explosion.
So what does this all mean? They survived the blast, they are getting medical care, but they didn't actually escape, did they?
No, they really didn't. This ending is where the core theme of occupational horror comes full circle. It emphasizes the cyclical, inescapable nature of trauma for the marginalized.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Just as the narrator and Dee felt permanently marked by their criminal records, forever unable to escape the judgment of society, they are now permanently marked by this supernatural encounter.
The socioeconomic system trapped them inside that deadly house, and now the horror from that house has followed them right back into another institution.
The hospital. They simply traded a prison cell for a hospital bed. There is no clean getaway for the guys at the absolute bottom of the ladder.
It is a remarkably bleak conclusion, but undeniably powerful storytelling. Now, I want to pivot and pull back from the narrative itself because the source material we are examining today includes the outro from the YouTube channel that hosted this story, Jordan Grupe Horror.
Right.
The meta-context of how this story was produced and consumed is just as fascinating as the plot.
The modern internet horror community has evolved into a highly unique and interactive ecosystem. It's so unlike traditional publishing.
In the channel's outro, the host mentions that his fanbase refers to him as the Mike Rowe of creepypasta occupational stories.
Which is a brilliant nod to the old television show Dirty Jobs.
Exactly. It highlights how this specific niche, the blue-collar nightmare, has cultivated a dedicated, passionate audience. And for those of you who might not be familiar with the term, creepypasta refers to internet-born horror legends that spread organically. Originally, they were spread by people copying and pasting the text across different forums and message boards.
It is a highly collaborative ecosystem. The author of this specific story, Chris West, is actually a traditionally published author with a book called I've Never Told Anyone.
Oh, wow.
Yet, he actively chooses to release stories for free on Reddit and YouTube to engage directly with this subculture.
The channel host also talks about how their new collaborative book, Hollow Zen, managed to hit the top 50 on Amazon's horror comedy list. But the element that stood out the most to me is the audience involvement.
Yeah, the community aspect is huge.
The host gives a vocal shout-out to a Patreon member named Squishy, who actually suggested a storyline for a bonus chapter.
That's so cool.
The community guidelines even state that if you support the channel at a certain tier, you get written into the stories as a character. I love the enthusiasm for how the internet has democratized storytelling. Anyone with a keyboard and a terrifying idea can bypass traditional publishers and find an audience.
Absolutely.
But it does make me wonder, does knowing all this behind-the-scenes community stuff, like the Patreon shout-outs and the Discord chats, ruin the immersion of the horror story for the listener?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, I would argue it actually deeply enhances the experience. It makes modern internet horror function like genuine folklore.
Like urban legends.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think about how ancient ghost stories and myths used to be told. They were not locked away in a pristine, copyrighted hardcover book sitting on a library shelf.
Right.
They were told orally around a campfire.
Hmm.
People listening would chime in, add their own local details, suggest new endings, or even playfully write their friends into the narrative as the victims.
Oh, that makes perfect sense.
What happens on these YouTube channels and Reddit boards is simply the digital evolution of that ancient campfire tradition. The audience is not passive. They directly shape the mythos they consume.
The campfire just got bigger and moved onto a server. That completely reframes how I view these comment sections. Looking back at everything we've explored today, it has been quite a journey.
A very intense journey.
We started by examining a deeply poignant critique of the post-prison employment trap. The cinder blocks tied to your ankles when you were just trying to swim.
We moved from that systemic reality into the overwhelming sensory and psychological nightmare of a hoarder home. We unpacked how blue-collar workers use dark humor as a vital shield against absorbing the tragedy of their environment.
That escalated into a literal, explosive mythological battle against a manifestation of madness. We had a minotaur and a demonic, parasitic jester doll, all set inside a kitchen rapidly filling with leaking gas.
Such a wild sequence.
And finally, we analyzed the fascinating collaborative world of digital folklore that makes stories like this possible. It really serves as a reminder to you, our listener, of the value of undertaking these deep dives. You can find profound sociological themes about class, trauma, and systemic marginalization hidden right inside a monster story about a killer porcelain doll.
The depth is always there, if you are willing to look past the superficial layer of jump scares and trash bags.
But before we officially wrap up today's deep dive, I want to leave you with one final lingering thought based on the source text.
Okay, let's hear it.
Think back to that neatly dressed stranger who randomly showed up at the hoarder house. The man who somehow knew Dee's home address but vehemently refused to intervene in the danger.
Yeah, that guy was so unsettling.
He explicitly stated that he was just there to witness the horror unfold, perfectly content to watch these desperate men fight for their lives without lifting a single finger to help them.
That character's passivity really raises a rather uncomfortable question about our own relationship with this genre.
Are we, the audience, sitting safely and comfortably in our homes, consuming these terrifying stories of desperate blue-collar workers fighting for their lives purely for our own entertainment? Are we actually playing the role of the stranger,